The Toronto Star story entitled The Fix focused the lens on the Redstone unit, part of a Peel Region long-term care residence. A new path to care in units like Redstone was being introduced around the world by a British nursing home radical. The radical program was called Butterfly. The 21-minute documentary and accompanying 4-chapter written piece introduced us to the unit before the Butterfly program. It gave voice to the care workers within the residence. It introduced us to the bureaucratic maneuvering necessary to usher in change and to put names and faces and stories onto the residents themselves. Redstone, until the introduction of the Butterfly program, depended on a task-oriented model of care for their residents. Caregivers moved from one task to another, logging into a database to ensure the residents were fed, clothed, washed. Rinse, repeat. John and Inga and Paolo, fed, clothed, washed. Repeat. The monotony of the tasks leaving little time for personal contact, creative connection, or even joy. Not only were residents left understimulated, lonely, and isolated, morale among staff and caregivers was low. After a thorough assessment by David Sheard and his team, Redstone was given close to a catastrophically poor ranking. A change in culture of care was imperative. So administrators appealed to the Peel Region Council seeking the approval and funds necessary to introduce the Butterfly program. Now, the Star reporters and their team were right there alongside this process. This was a stellar example of journalism bringing us closer to our humanity. The right questions were asked, but more important, the questions were asked in the right way. Each resident had a name and a unique story. Each caregiver had something at stake. Trust had to be built with each visitor and family member. A story like this takes time, it takes patience and sensitivity, it takes a beautiful eye, and perhaps a bad word in some journalistic circles, it takes a tremendous amount of empathy. If you watched a time lapse of the life of a butterfly, you have a sense of how these reporters allowed this story to unfold. With great care, a deft touch, a precise yet poetic telling of a remarkable metamorphosis. None of us are immune to this story. The impact will affect every one of us in one way or another. So Moira and Randy, we thank you.
Thank you so much to the Hillman Foundation for this honor. Randy and I really, really appreciate it. There's a big team of people at the Star that I want to thank, but first, I'd like to make a rather counterintuitive thank you, I guess, since this is in many ways a counterintuitive story. The person who really helped this move along was a communications director from Peel Region, and normally journalists don't thank communications directors ever, but in this case I'm going to, because she really put herself on the line, and her bosses were very wary of inviting us into the home, even to talk to me. And she really, really pushed this idea that it was okay to take a risk and let the Star in and let us see what might not look good, what might not reflect well on them, but at the same time, it might actually help create some advocacy and move this issue forward. And they chose to do that, so I really appreciate it. Her name is Janet Eagleson, and I just wanted to thank her. I really wish Randy Risling was here tonight at the Redstone unit. We started calling him the coolest guy in Canada, and he has spent the winter, he left us at the Star and spent the winter surfing in Ecuador, and is now moving to Calgary, but he really appreciates this honor and is really, really excited about this as well. His documentary of our 12 months at the Redstone unit in Peel Region was beautiful. It amazed me how he was able to take those hours of video and turn them into something lovely, a seamless story about humanity, showing, for example, 94-year-old Inga's return to her vivacious self as the Butterfly program transformed the unit. I've spent most of my career working on stories that focus on the negative, to change things for the better. It felt a bit strange then to work on a story that might actually be an investigation into the positive. But from the moment I heard that Peel wanted to transform their home from the old traditional style of care, I knew it was a story that must be told, and gratefully we were allowed to come in and tell it. To be clear, dementia always progresses. Nothing turns back the clock. But what the Butterfly program showed was that people living with it and living in the home could come back to life in more ways than we ever imagined. When I think of the word potential, I think about it related to my children or my friends' children. But in this case, I think Randy and I both realize that anyone can have potential at any stage in life. A 94-year-old, an 89-year-old, whether they have cognitive decline or not. The story showed that they could dance to music again, they could sing to disco, to ABBA, they could bake bread and enjoy their lives, doing things that you would normally do in your own home. The butterfly experiment showed that people can come back to life through kindness and human connection. And here's an example. A man named Roger was in advanced stages of dementia. He spent his days in a chair. He didn't move. I don't think he could move. 6 months into the program, I went in one day and I saw him with headphones on and is shaking a maraca, and he was singing to the Dancing Queen. And it was his own version of singing, but his feet were tapping. He was, making music to the beat, and it was a beautiful thing to see. And the caregivers would bring me over, and they'd have tears in their eyes when they would show this to me, and other examples of people just really, really embracing life again. As a reporter, I'll say it again, I'm trained to look for the negative, and I didn't know what to expect when we published. Randy and I think we both felt the same way when the reaction was so positive. People were calling, people were crying, people would stop me in the hallways and call and say this was the best moment of their life when they read this story. And so there's a real hunger, we learned, for change related to older people and the care within the homes. And I'm hoping that our story will continue to create change. There are some really strong glimmers that is going to happen. It's a slow process, but I think it builds. As always, there is a very large star team that I would like to thank for this, starting with Irene Gentle, Lynn McCauley, David Bruiser, Kevin Donovan, and Bert Bruiser, Jesse McLean, Andy Bailey, Richard Loutons, and Fatty and his design team, including Tanya. Everyone who worked on this story made it better. It was a true team experience, and we were given an incredible amount of time to work on it, and we really, really appreciated that. So thank you so much for this honor.